In 1967, a woman named Hazel Crenshaw sat down to supper alone for the first time in her kitchen in Pikeville, Kentucky. Her husband had passed in March. Her children had moved to Dayton and Louisville. The table that once held 5 plates now held 1. She did not cry that night. She pulled out a single pot, filled it with beans, an onion, and a ham bone, and cooked the same supper she had made for 40 years. Except now, it was just for her. Number 42 on this list costs less than $1 and makes enough for 3 nights. Number 17 uses 1 burner and takes less than 15 minutes. And number 1 is the meal that grandmothers across this country still make when the house is quiet and nobody is coming for dinner. These are not fancy meals. They are not meals for company. They are the meals you make when it is just you, 1 pot, and the stove your mother taught you to cook on. Hit that subscribe button. Here are 60 forgotten poor man 1-pot meals for seniors living alone. Copper Penny's salad was a colorful, tangy dish made from sliced carrots that resembled shiny coins, giving it its distinctive name. The carrots were boiled briefly until tender, then marinated in a dressing of tomato soup, vinegar, sugar, and onions. Served chilled, the salad had a sweet and sour flavor that paired well with grilled meats and was a popular make-ahead dish for picnics or potlucks. Its bright orange color made it a cheerful addition to buffet tables, while its zesty flavor kept it from being overly sweet like many other mid-century salads. Homemakers appreciated its convenience because it could be made in large batches and stored for days, often tasting better after the flavors had time to meld. In many households, Copper Penny's salad became a staple recipe clipped from church cookbooks or passed among neighbors. Though it has faded from modern kitchens, it represents a time when resourcefulness and creativity turned simple vegetables into crowd-pleasing dishes that carried both flavor and fun. Number 21. Creamed chipped beef on toast. The military gave it a name that cannot be printed here. Mothers kept it clean. Thin slices of dried beef, salt-cured and almost leathery, torn into strips and dropped into a white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk, poured over thick slices of white toast. That was supper. In working-class neighborhoods across Ohio and Pennsylvania, and in mill towns from the Piedmont to the Monongahela Valley, this was a weeknight staple from the 1940s all the way through the 1960s. A jar of dried beef cost 35 cents in 1965. It fed 4 people over toast. The roux had to be stirred constantly or it scorched, which is why every woman who made it stood at the stove the whole time. There were no shortcuts. The white sauce either came together smooth or it didn't. Most mothers could tell by the smell when it was right. They didn't use a timer, they just knew. That is a kind of skill you can't buy. Cabbage rolls are right out of Eastern Europe. They're the perfect thing to have at a salad bar or a low-key party where you're not trying to rack up the calories. A lot of food that's meant to be for events bloats you badly and leaves you feeling sluggish and lazy throughout the day. It's good to have dishes like these to help balance things out. Cabbage rolls are made out of ground meat and rice, which is then seasoned in cabbage leaves, which by themselves have a really nice crunch. This dish is something we can thank immigrants for, specifically Polish ones. They brought it back with them when they first came over to America, and when the citizens noticed how budget and gut health friendly the dish was, they couldn't resist adopting it for themselves. Then again, so much of American culture is imported from other places after all. One-pot culture is something we can somewhat say is our own, and it really shined with cabbage rolls because it meant that the cabbage could soften but not run a risk of burning. Price-wise, this was down to about $2–3 for a family-sized batch, which is a pretty good bargain. A head of cabbage cost 10 cents in 1963, roughly what it had cost for the 30 years before that, and it was the vegetable of last resort, bought when the budget had run down to coins. In the right hands, it became something else. Fatback is the cured, salt-heavy layer from a hog's back, and when it rendered slowly in a heavy pot, it produced a fat that was smoky and porky in a way nothing else replicated. You started with the fatback, letting it crisp until the pieces were golden. Then the cabbage went in rough shredded, the onion in thick half-moons, lid down. 6 hours in the slow cooker. What came out was nothing like raw cabbage. Leaves collapsed into silky sweet folds, onion dissolved into the broth. fatback bits scattered through like small pieces of concentrated pork. You soaked it up with cornbread. A 10-cent vegetable became the dish people asked for on Sundays, not because there was nothing better available, but because there wasn't. Number 23. Sugar bread. This was dessert in homes where dessert did not exist. A slice of bread, a smear of butter or lard, a spoonful of sugar on top. That was it. Children in textile mill towns across the Carolinas ate this after supper and thought it was a treat. Mothers in the Dust Bowl handed it to their kids and called it cake. In families where even butter was a luxury, they used bacon grease instead and still sprinkled the sugar. Sugar was about 6 cents a pound in 1933. A woman in Gastonia, North Carolina, remembered her mother making sugar bread every Friday night during the Depression. She said it felt like a celebration even though there was nothing to celebrate. That small sweetness at the end of a hard day mattered more than it should have. Number 14. Pinto beans and cornbread. A pound of dried pinto beans cost about 29 cents in 1965. A box of cornmeal cost a dime. Together, they fed a family of 8 for 3 days and provided complete protein without a single piece of meat required. A woman in a coal mining community in Anawalt, West Virginia, soaked her pintos overnight, then simmered them all day long with a ham bone, a diced onion, and salt and pepper, and nothing else. The pot liquor, the broth the beans made as they cooked, was rich and smoky and the color of rust. The cornbread baked in the same cast-iron skillet her grandmother had used, greased with bacon drippings until the edges turned crispy and the center stayed soft enough to crumble directly into the bowl of beans. Pinto beans and cornbread was the survival meal of Appalachia for more than 100 years. Families in the coal camps packed them in lunch tins and carried them into the mines. When Appalachian families migrated north to Cincinnati and Cleveland and Detroit in search of factory work, they brought this meal with them. A restaurant on Vine Street in Cincinnati called Tucker's served soup beans 7 days a week through most of the 1950s, because the customers who had come up from Kentucky and West Virginia needed to taste home. If the meatball sub was the Friday splurge, this was the Tuesday penance. Olive loaf, sliced thin at the deli counter, laid on 2 slices of Wonder Bread with mayonnaise and nothing else. The meat was a processed blend of pork, beef, and soy, studded with pimento-stuffed olives coated in milk powder to keep them from sliding during production. Oscar Mayer made the best-known version, though every regional meatpacker had one. It looked strange, smelled faintly sweet, and had a texture somewhere between bologna and a fever dream, but the men who ate it without complaint because it lasted all week. Olive loaf held a quiet place in the American deli case from the 50s through the late 70s, ordered by the quarter pound by women who knew exactly how many sandwiches it would make. Oscar Mayer discontinued it quietly. Most people didn't notice until the space in the cold case filled with something else. American chop suey had nothing to do with Chinese cooking, but everything to do with feeding hungry families cheaply. Ground beef was browned with onions and celery, then combined with elbow macaroni and canned tomatoes in one big pot that simmered until everything melted together. The dish went by different names. Some called it goulash, others called it slumgullion, but the principle was always the same. Stretch the meat with pasta and vegetables until a single pound fed 8 people comfortably. Grandmothers adjusted based on what was available, adding green peppers when the garden produced or leaving them out when money was tight. The tomato base could come from fresh tomatoes, canned sauce, or even ketchup thinned with water. Families gathered around kitchen tables with big serving spoons, filling bowls with this stew-like mixture. Children grew up thinking this was gourmet food because it was served with such love. The recipe required no measuring, just instinct passed from mother to daughter. Cornmeal mush was humble food that grandmas transformed into multiple meals through clever preparation. The mush itself was simple. Cornmeal stirred slowly into boiling water with salt until thick enough to hold a spoon upright. Eaten hot with butter and molasses, it was breakfast that warmed bellies on cold mornings. But grandmas knew the real magic came the next day, when leftover mush was sliced from the pan where it had cooled and firmed overnight. Those slices were fried in bacon grease until golden and crispy on the outside while staying creamy inside. Fried mush appeared with eggs and sausage, topped with syrup, or served alongside soup beans for supper. The dish stretched a few cents worth of cornmeal into 2 different meals, embodying the waste-nothing philosophy of country kitchens. Children loved the contrast between the crunchy exterior and soft interior, never realizing they were eating poverty food transformed by their grandmother's skill. Seal meat formed the foundation of coastal Inuit survival, providing protein, fat, and essential nutrients that kept families alive through impossible winters. Hunters waited at breathing holes for hours in temperatures that would kill unprepared visitors, knowing a single seal could feed their family for days. The meat was often eaten raw and fresh, still warm, because cooking fuel was precious and raw meat retained more vitamins. Blood was consumed as well, rich with iron and never wasted. Families divided seals according to strict customs, with elders receiving choice portions while ensuring everyone had enough. The liver was especially valuable, given to children and pregnant women first. Seal fat was rendered into oil for lamps, providing both light and heat during endless polar nights. Nothing was discarded because every part served purpose in harsh Arctic survival. Seal meat tasted of the ocean, slightly fishy but clean, sustaining generations who knew no other way. Beef and macaroni skillet was the one-pan wonder that got dinner on the table in 30 minutes flat. Ground beef was browned in a large skillet, then dry elbow macaroni was added right into the pan along with canned tomatoes, water, and seasonings. The whole thing simmered covered until the pasta turned tender and absorbed the tomato beef liquid into something rich and saucy. No separate pot for boiling pasta, no draining, no extra dishes to wash afterward. This was the meal grandmothers made when time was short and children were hungry and patience was wearing thin. The skillet went straight to the table where families served themselves from the pan. 1 pound of beef and a box of macaroni fed 6 hungry mouths without complaint. Seasonings varied by household. Some added oregano and garlic. Others kept it simple with just salt and pepper. The dish was forgiving of distracted cooks and hungry children sneaking bites before dinner was called. Wilted lettuce salad appeared when gardens overflowed with tender greens that wouldn't keep. Grandmas picked leaf lettuce in the cool of morning, washing it in basins of well water and tearing it into pieces by hand. Hot bacon grease was poured directly over the greens, wilting them instantly while the fat coated every leaf with smoky richness. Vinegar and a pinch of sugar went into the skillet next, creating a warm dressing that was spooned over the wilted leaves. Some grandmas added sliced green onions or hard-boiled eggs to stretch the dish further. The salad was eaten immediately while still warm, before the greens turned soggy and lost their texture. This wasn't fancy restaurant food, it was country wisdom that transformed abundant lettuce into something special. Children who turned their noses up at raw salad would eat wilted lettuce gladly because the bacon made everything better. The dish appeared only during growing season, making each serving feel precious and fleeting. Seal oil served as both food and fuel, the versatile foundation of Inuit household economy that no family could survive without. Women rendered blubber in shallow stone lamps, collecting golden liquid that rose and pooled on surface. This oil burned in lamps, providing light and heat, but was also consumed directly, drizzled over dried meat, mixed into soups, and eaten by spoonful when extra calories were needed. The flavor was strong and fishy, an acquired taste children developed early because refusing seal oil meant refusing survival. Seal oil preserved other foods, preventing dried fish and meat from becoming too tough to chew. It also served as medicine, applied to wounds and chapped skin damaged by constant cold. Families traded seal oil across vast distances, its value recognized by all Arctic peoples. A lamp filled with seal oil meant warmth, light, and life during months when sun never rose above horizon. Seal oil was liquid gold in frozen world. Split pea soup with ham bone turned Sunday's leftover ham into a week's worth of nourishing meals. After the ham was eaten, seniors would drop the bone into a pot with dried split peas, water, onion, and carrots, then let everything simmer until the peas dissolved into velvety thickness. The ham bone released its smoky essence, and whatever meat clung to it shredded into the soup, providing protein throughout every spoonful. Split peas required no overnight soaking, making this soup more spontaneous than navy bean versions. The finished soup was thick enough that a spoon could stand upright in it, and the flavor was deeply savory with sweetness from the carrots. Seniors could refrigerate portions and reheat throughout the week, the soup improving as flavors melded. This represented ultimate economical eating. The ham bone was essentially free, having already served its purpose. For seniors counting every penny, split pea soup proved delicious meals could emerge from what others might discard. Hash from leftover roast was Monday dinner in homes across America, made by chopping Sunday's beef or pork into small pieces and frying it with diced potatoes and onions. Housewives eyeballed the proportions, using however much meat remained and enough potatoes to stretch it into a full meal. The mixture was pressed into a hot skillet with bacon drippings, then left undisturbed until the bottom formed a crispy brown crust. The flip required confidence, turning the entire mass to crisp the other side. Some housewives added a fried egg on top, the runny yolk becoming sauce for the hash beneath. Hash represented the practical wisdom of using every scrap of expensive meat rather than letting it spoil. Children grew up eating it without realizing they were eating leftovers, since the transformation was complete. This technique required no recipe because the proportions adjusted naturally to whatever remained from Sunday dinner. Hash has largely vanished from modern tables. Salmon patties transformed canned fish into crispy golden discs that graced Friday dinner tables in Catholic households and blue-collar homes alike. Canned salmon, bones, skin, and all, was mashed with cracker crumbs, egg, and minced onion, then shaped into patties and fried until the exterior turned beautifully crisp while the inside stayed moist. The bones, soft from processing, were simply crushed and mixed in, providing calcium that working families might otherwise lack. Mothers served these with cream gravy poured over the top or alongside boiled potatoes and canned peas. A single can could stretch into 6 patties, making it economical when meat prices climbed. The distinctive smell of salmon frying announced dinner throughout the neighborhood. Children either loved or dreaded Friday salmon nights, but everyone cleaned their plates. This thrifty classic has nearly disappeared from modern kitchens, though those who remember it recall the satisfying crunch fondly. 7-layer salad was as much about presentation as it was about flavor, a dish designed to show off the abundance of the American kitchen. Layered in a clear glass bowl, it became a visual feast with bright greens, peas, cheddar cheese, bacon, chopped eggs, and more stacked neatly on top of one another. The crowning glory was always a thick layer of mayonnaise or creamy dressing spread across the top, sealing the salad and keeping it fresh until served. It was a dish that encouraged gathering around the table because diners would scoop down through the layers, mixing textures and flavors with each serving. This salad often appeared at church picnics, barbecues, and holiday spreads, where it symbolized both generosity and creativity. It was hearty enough to serve as a main dish, especially in summers when people avoided heating the oven, yet simple enough to prepare with pantry staples. While modern diets might shy away from such heavy use of mayonnaise, 7-layer salad remains a nostalgic reminder of a time when presentation mattered and sharing colorful food was a form of pride. Number 15. Rice and gravy. In the bayou country of South Louisiana and the rice farming counties of East Texas, rice and gravy was not a side dish. It was the meal itself. Beef drippings from whatever cut had been cooked the day before, reheated and thickened with flour and water into a brown gravy that soaked into the rice until every grain was dark and glossy. Families in Vermilion Parish, Louisiana, ate this 3 nights a week. The pot that made the gravy was the same pot used to cook the rice. 1 burner, 1 pot, 1 meal. The secret, if there was one, was patience over the roux, which required stirring over a medium flame until the flour went from raw to deep brown without burning. Every Cajun grandmother had her own timing for this. None of them wrote it down. You learned it by standing next to her at the stove until the smell was right. That's how the best skills move through generations. Let's go on over to Creole cuisine. Want to know a hot spot for that kind of cooking back in the 1970s? It was shrimp Creole, which had hints of several other styles of cooking. You could have something with French, Spanish, and African influences all in one bite. That's a pretty vast variety of flavors, so let's break down what shrimp Creole had out of all of that. You have your basics like bell peppers, onions, and celery, but it also had canned tomatoes for a no-fuss sauce that really soaked in all of the aromatics and gave the shrimp a pretty unique flair. You could make this dish for around $2.80 back then, because per lb of shrimp usually cost you around $1.50 or $2 back then. That's a pretty bare minimum price, but let's say you were cooking for a family of 4. You would have been good in, like, $10 or $15 maximum. The whole mix of onions, celery, and peppers was actually considered a trinity in Cajun and Creole cooking. Shrimp Creole also made a lot of use of thyme, parsley, okra, and garlic as well, so you could really mix and match and see what worked best for you. Not everyone liked the traditional versions of the dish, and I can't blame them because it's meant for people who grew up having a completely different palate than ours. All the same, this dish, which is traditionally served over rice, was considered one of the greatest hits of the cuisine. Cajun and Creole in general had found a pretty nice home for themselves in places like New Orleans and Louisiana. Restaurants like Antoine's and Tujag's in the 19th century were establishing a solid Creole cooking scene, and by the 20th century, cookbooks had already featured shrimp Creole as a solid dish you could rely on whenever you needed more seafood in your diet. She started them the night before. Always the night before. That rule had been passed down through Appalachian kitchens where dried lima beans were the difference between a full table and an empty one in winter. You soaked them overnight in cold water, and by morning they'd swelled to twice their size. She'd drain them and pack them into the slow cooker with the salt pork. Not bacon, not ham, but salt pork, the cured side meat that was the backbone of Appalachian cooking through the 19th and 20th centuries. 8 hours on low. The salt pork dissolved into the broth, releasing a deep, cured sweetness the beans alone could never produce. The soup was thick, pale, and filling in the way only bean soups are, the kind of full that lasted all day. She made it every winter without measuring a single ingredient. She knew when it was done by the smell from the kitchen and the specific way the steam moved when she lifted the lid. That knowing went with her. No recipe written down since has quite replaced it. Number 15. Hot water cornbread. Cornmeal. Boiling water. A little salt. Women mixed it into a thick paste, shaped it into small patties with their hands, and dropped them into a skillet of hot grease. They fried up golden on the outside and dense and warm on the inside. In the rural South, hot water cornbread was the bread of people who could not afford flour for biscuits. A 5-pound bag of cornmeal cost 15 cents in 1935, and it made dozens of patties. There was no egg, no milk, no baking powder, just corn and water and heat. The technique went back to Native American cooking. Cornmeal and water, shaped by hand, cooked over fire. Settlers learned it and passed it down, and by the time the Depression hit, hot water cornbread was second nature in homes across Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Women made it 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes as a side, sometimes as the whole meal with a bowl of beans or a glass of buttermilk. It was as old as the country itself, and it fed more Americans than most people will ever know. Number 22, fried potatoes and onions. Every family had this, not a variation of it. This exact dish. You slice the potatoes thin, drop them in a heavy skillet with lard or bacon grease, let them go until the edges started to color, then threw in a yellow onion sliced into rings. The whole pan hissed and filled the house with a smell that still brings grown adults to a stop if they walk past a diner and catch it drifting out the door. A 10-pound bag of potatoes cost 53 cents in 1960. One onion was a few cents more. In farm communities from Ohio down through Arkansas, this was not a side dish. It was dinner. Some nights, it was the only dinner. Your mother never measured anything. She knew the pan size, knew the heat, knew by the sound of the sizzle when to turn them. She did not apologize. She set the pan on the table and everyone ate from it, and that was supper. Not every plant had a cafeteria. The smaller operations, machine shops, tool and die outfits, warehouses with under 50 workers, got a bank of vending machines bolted to the break room wall, and that was lunch. The sandwich was always the same. 2 slices of white bread, a layer of processed ham or turkey, a square of American cheese, and a smear of mayonnaise, sealed in cellophane on a slowly rotating shelf behind glass. You put in your quarters, turned the chrome knob, and the little door popped open. The bread was damp from refrigeration, the cheese too orange, and the whole thing tasted like last week. The concept traced back to Horn and Hard Arts automats, which served 350,000 people a day in New York before fast food replaced them. None of that charm survived in the factory version. Just fluorescent light, humming compressors, and a sandwich that existed because someone had to eat between shifts. Sugar bread cost almost nothing and meant the world to a child who had never tasted store-bought candy. A slice of bread, a thin layer of butter or lard, and a spoonful of white sugar pressed into the fat before it melted. Some added cinnamon if they had it. Most did not. You folded it in half and ate it standing up, and the crunch of sugar against soft bread was the closest thing to dessert in a house where dessert did not exist. White sugar sold for about 5 cents a pound, and even in the hardest months, most pantries kept a small sack. Kids came home from school and made it themselves. No oven, no mixing, no waiting. Open-faced was the proper way, but hungry little ones folded it because it held together better in small hands. When you try to explain it to someone who did not grow up that way, they hear poverty. You hear love measured in a teaspoon. She started it the night before. Always the night before. Shepherd's pie without the lamb was how American grandmothers adapted the British classic to budgets and tastes. Ground beef was browned with onions and mixed with whatever vegetables were available: peas, carrots, corn, green beans, then spread in a baking dish and topped with mashed potatoes. The whole thing baked until the potatoes turned golden brown and the filling bubbled up around the edges. Grandmothers made this when they needed one dish to serve as the entire meal, complete with meat, vegetables, and starch. The mashed potato topping could be piped fancy for company or simply spread with a fork for Tuesday supper. Families ate it straight from the baking dish, scooping portions that included every layer. The dish used up leftover mashed potatoes and any vegetables that needed cooking. 1 pound of beef beneath all those potatoes and vegetables fed 8 people satisfied. This was the cooking of women who never wasted anything. Tomato gravy turned summer's abundance into comfort that warmed even on the hottest days. Grandmas started with bacon grease in a cast iron skillet, stirring in flour until it browned and adding fresh tomatoes that fell apart as they cooked. The mixture thickened into a tangy, savory gravy that was nothing like the brown gravies of winter. Some grandmas added sugar to balance the tomatoes' acidity, while others preferred the sharper taste that came from fully ripe fruit straight from the garden. The gravy was poured over biscuits for breakfast or supper, the tomato juices soaking into the bread and turning it soft and flavorful. During canning season, when tomatoes overflowed baskets, this gravy appeared at nearly every meal. It used fruit too soft for canning and too ripe for slicing, proving that nothing from the garden ever went to waste in kitchens where grandmas stretched every harvest. Frozen raw fish, eaten directly from ice caches, was everyday food for Inuit families who understood cooking destroyed vital nutrients. Fishermen stored catch in snow houses or permafrost cellars where temperatures stayed constant year-round. When hunger struck, someone retrieved frozen fish and shaved thin slices directly from solid flesh using sharp knives. These frozen shavings melted on tongue, releasing clean flavors that cooking would have diminished. The practice provided maximum nutrition from every catch, preserving vitamins heat would destroy. Children grew up eating frozen fish as casually as other cultures ate bread, knowing no other way. Families often ate together, gathered around frozen fish from which everyone sliced portions according to appetite. The texture was smooth and crystalline, the flavor pure and bright with ocean minerals. Frozen raw fish demonstrated Inuit understanding of nutrition, centuries before Western science confirmed their wisdom. This was survival eating refined to elegant simplicity. Poached eggs on creamed spinach transformed 2 humble ingredients into something approaching elegance. Seniors would heat canned spinach with milk and butter, seasoning it with nutmeg until velvety and rich. A perfectly poached egg, whites set, yolk still runny, was nestled on top, creating a meal that delivered protein, iron, and vitamins in every forkful. The runny yolk became its own sauce, mixing with the creamed spinach to create flavors far more sophisticated than the preparation suggested. This dish required only one small pot and a skillet, minimizing both effort and cleanup. For seniors struggling with iron deficiency or fatigue, the combination of egg and spinach provided exactly what their bodies needed. The meal came together in under 15 minutes and cost almost nothing, yet looked and tasted like something from a proper restaurant. Many widows served this to themselves as a small act of self-care, proving that eating alone didn't mean eating poorly. Scalloped potatoes with ham was a casserole housewives assembled by instinct, layering sliced potatoes, diced leftover ham, and creamy sauce without measuring anything. The potatoes were sliced thin by hand, each cook knowing exactly the thickness that would cook through without becoming mushy. Between the layers went bits of ham from Sunday dinner, stretching one roast through multiple meals. The sauce was made from butter, flour, and milk in proportions learned by watching mothers work. Some added sliced onions between layers, while others kept it simple with salt and pepper. The casserole baked slowly until the potatoes were tender and the top turned golden brown with crispy edges that everyone fought over. This dish fed large families economically by using leftover meat and inexpensive potatoes. It could be assembled in the morning and baked before dinner, freeing housewives for other tasks. Scalloped potatoes appeared at church suppers and weeknight dinners throughout the decade. Today, this slow-baked comfort food rarely appears. Ham and bean soup represented the ultimate expression of blue-collar thrift, transforming leftover ham bones into thick, nourishing soup that could feed a family for days. After Sunday ham dinners, the bone with its clinging bits of meat went into a large pot with dried navy beans, onions, celery, and water. The soup simmered for hours until the beans broke down into creaminess and the ham fell from the bone in tender shreds. The resulting broth was rich with smoky pork flavor, thick enough that a spoon could almost stand in it. Working families knew that a good ham bone was never wasted. It was the beginning of another meal entirely. Children came home to find the soup warming on the stove, served with thick slices of buttered bread or crackers crumbled directly into their bowls. The soup tasted even better the second day when flavors had melded overnight. This kind of practical cooking has largely disappeared as fewer families buy bone-in hams or take the time for slow simmering. Snickers salad was one of the more playful and quirky dishes to appear at Midwestern potlucks, reflecting the region's love of turning candy into something that could be called a salad. This sweet creation combined chopped candy bars with apples, whipped topping, and sometimes pudding mix, creating a dessert that was rich, creamy, and slightly crunchy. Despite its unusual name, it became a beloved treat at church basements and school functions where children eagerly piled it onto their plates. For adults, it was both a nostalgic indulgence and a conversation piece, blurring the line between dessert and side dish. The contrast between tart apples and sweet chocolate made it more balanced than it sounds, and its simplicity made it quick to prepare in just minutes. Cookbooks and community recipe cards from the late 20th century often featured it as a way to dress up ordinary fruit. While modern tastes might scoff at calling candy-laden dishes salads, Snickers salad captures the inventive and humorous spirit of American potluck culture. Number 23. Dried corn soup. After the last ears of summer corn came off the stalks, women across the hill country of Pennsylvania and West Virginia cut the kernels thin and laid them out to dry on old window screens set in the sun. By October, the kernels had shriveled to hard, pale chips with a concentrated sweetness that fresh corn never had. Come November, a handful went into a pot of water with a piece of side meat, an onion, and nothing else. The pot simmered all afternoon while your grandmother worked at something else. By supper, the dried kernels had swollen back up and turned the broth milky and thick. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, among Mennonite and Pennsylvania Dutch families, this was called dried corn soup, and it appeared every winter without fail. The flavor was not like canned corn. It was deeper, almost nutty, the way something tastes when summer has been cooked down to its most honest form. One pot. No stove skill required beyond patience. The women who made it were alive to the fact that summer did not last. They made it last anyway. Easter Sunday ended around 3. By 5, she had already turned to the leftover ham, not the sliced portion, which was tomorrow's sandwiches, but the thick end piece the knife couldn't reach cleanly. She sliced the Yukon Gold potatoes thin, layered them with the ham and onion in the ceramic crock. Potato, onion, ham, cream sauce, potato again. The cream sauce was flour, butter, whole milk, dry mustard powder, and black pepper. Everything already in the kitchen. 8 hours on low, and by evening the crock had become one unified thing rather than 3 ingredients. Scalloped potatoes with ham was a New England farmhouse tradition before slow cookers existed, built to use every scrap of the holiday pig before it spoiled. Nothing left her Easter table unused. The ham bone went into bean soup the following week. She said, "Waste not, want not," and she didn't say it like a virtue. She said it like a fact. Number 19, milk toast. If you ever got sick as a child, your grandmother may have made this when somebody was old or when there was almost nothing left in the kitchen. Stale bread or toast, warm milk poured over the top, a little sugar or a pinch of salt, depending on the family. In the 1940s, whenever a child stayed home from school with a fever, this was what appeared on the bedside table. It was soft enough for toddlers and gentle enough for elderly people who had lost their teeth. Milk toast showed up in American kitchens as far back as the 1800s, and by the Depression, it had become the unofficial meal of last resort. It cost a few pennies. It required no cooking skill whatsoever, and it carried a strange kind of comfort that had nothing to do with flavor and everything to do with being taken care of. Number 19, beans and weenies. This one had a proper name. Van Camp started calling their canned version beanie weenies sometime in the 1960s, and the name caught on, but families had been making the dish at home for decades before anyone put it in a can. You opened a can of pork and beans, sliced a pack of hot dogs into rounds, heated everything together in a saucepan over medium heat, and dinner was done in 6 minutes. In 1961, you could feed a family of 4 on beans and weenies for under 30 cents. In New England, it was a Saturday night tradition. In Indiana, it was a weeknight staple. In Texas, it was what you ate when the end of the month arrived before the paycheck did. Every region had their own version. Some families stirred in brown sugar and a squirt of mustard. Some added chopped onion. Some ate it straight from the pot. What nobody did was apologize for it. The children always ate every bite. The men who had served called it by its military name, and the men who hadn't learned it from the men who had. Creamed chipped beef on toast showed up in factory cafeterias across the Rust Belt with the regularity of payday. Dried beef sliced thin, fried in butter until the edges curled, folded into a white gravy of flour, milk, and black pepper, poured over toast that went soft the second the gravy touched it. The recipe first appeared in the 1910 Manual for Army Cooks, calling for 15 pounds of beef to feed 60 men. Factory kitchens scaled it down and kept the method. Stouffer's launched a frozen version in the early 60s that sold for decades. In the cafeteria, though, it was never frozen. Made that morning by a woman who didn't need a recipe card because the proportions lived in her hands. When she retired, the new cook used a measuring cup, and every man on the floor said it tasted different. Before the skillet cooled from that morning's mush, something even simpler was already cooking. Bean cakes happened when you had a pot of leftover beans and not much else. You mashed them, navy, pinto, black-eyed, whatever was on hand, mixed them with a handful of flour, shaped them into flat patties, and fried them in lard until a crust formed. By 1932, a bag of dried beans cost nearly nothing, and they needed no refrigeration. Yesterday's mushy leftovers became something crisp, hot, and filling enough to call dinner. People who could not afford meat ate them 3 or 4 times a week. The ones who seasoned them best added diced onion, a heavy shake of black pepper, and a scrape of bacon grease from the jar on the counter that gave them a smoky richness. Porcupine meatballs got their name from the rice that poked out like quills after cooking. Ground beef was mixed with uncooked rice, egg, onion, and seasonings, then shaped into balls and nestled into baking dishes. Tomato sauce or soup was poured over the top, and everything baked covered until the rice cooked through and the meatballs turned tender. The rice absorbed the tomato liquid as it cooked, swelling and poking through the meat in ways that delighted children and stretched the meal further. 1 pound of beef made a dozen large meatballs when the rice did its work, enough to feed a family with plenty of sauce for sopping with bread. Grandmothers made these when they wanted something playful without extra effort. The dish could simmer on the stovetop or bake in the oven, adapting to whatever else was happening in the kitchen. Children loved naming the funny-looking meatballs, while parents appreciated how far the ingredients stretched. Milk gravy over toast was breakfast when pantries held little else but flour, milk, and stale bread. Grandmas made a simple white sauce by cooking flour and butter until smooth, then slowly adding milk and stirring until thick. The gravy was poured over toasted bread, or bread fried in butter when it was too stale to toast properly, creating a meal that filled bellies without requiring meat or eggs. Some called it poor man's breakfast, but grandmas called it making do with dignity. Children ate it without complaint because grandma's hands made everything taste like love. The dish required no recipe because every country woman knew how to stretch milk and flour into sustenance. It appeared during lean times between harvests, when the smokehouse was empty, but the cow still gave milk. This simple combination kept families fed through hard winters and harder years, proving that survival and satisfaction could come from the humblest ingredients. Crowberry pudding offered rare sweetness in a land where sugar never existed naturally. Women gathered small black crowberries during brief summer weeks, collecting enough to preserve for winter treats. The berries were mashed and mixed with rendered fat, sometimes with added snow to create lighter texture. The resulting pudding was tart and rich, nothing like sweet desserts from warmer climates, but deeply satisfying nonetheless. Children especially treasured crowberry pudding, knowing it appeared only when berry supplies allowed indulgence. The berries provided essential vitamins during months without fresh vegetables. Families shared pudding at gatherings, passing bowls while stories filled long winter nights. Crowberries grew low to the ground in tundra regions, surviving conditions that killed most other plants. Gathering them required patience and knowledge of the land passed through generations. Crowberry pudding proved that celebration and sweetness could exist even in the harshest places on Earth. Canned salmon patties were the pink-centered comfort food that graced countless senior tables throughout the mid-20th century. A can of salmon was drained and mixed with cracker crumbs, egg, minced onion, and seasonings, then shaped into patties and fried until golden brown. The salmon's natural oils kept the patties moist inside, while the exterior developed a satisfying crunch. Canned salmon was affordable and required no special storage, perfect for seniors without large refrigerators. The fish provided complete protein plus omega fatty acids that helped maintain heart health and cognitive function. Many seniors fried their patties in butter, which added richness without overwhelming the delicate salmon flavor. Served with lemon wedges and a simple salad, salmon patties felt like a proper dinner rather than survival food. For elderly widowers who'd never learned to cook, this was often among the first recipes they mastered, simple enough to be foolproof, delicious enough to make repeatedly. Bread pudding transformed stale bread into dessert through a technique passed from generation to generation without written instructions. Housewives tore dried bread into chunks and soaked them in a mixture of milk, eggs, sugar, and vanilla until softened completely. The exact proportions depended on how much stale bread had accumulated. Cinnamon and nutmeg added warmth, while raisins provided bursts of sweetness throughout. The mixture was poured into a buttered baking dish and baked until puffed and golden, the top forming a slight crust while the inside stayed custardy. Some families served it warm with cream poured over, others preferred it cold the next morning for breakfast. The dish represented the waste-nothing philosophy that defined post-war kitchens. Every scrap of bread found purpose in this humble dessert that tasted far more elegant than its origin suggested. Bread pudding required no recipe because every housewife knew by touch when the bread was properly soaked and by sight when the pudding was done. Cabbage and noodles was peasant food perfected, requiring nothing more than a head of cabbage, egg noodles, butter, and patience to create something remarkably satisfying. The cabbage was sliced thin and slowly sautéed in butter until it caramelized into sweet golden strands that melted on the tongue. Meanwhile, egg noodles boiled until tender, then joined the cabbage in the skillet with salt, pepper, and sometimes caraway seeds. Hungarian, Polish, and German families all claimed this dish as their own, each with variations passed down through generations. The beauty was its simplicity. 3 ingredients transformed by technique into comfort food that cost almost nothing. Children initially suspicious of cabbage often became fans once they tasted it prepared this way. Working mothers could make this quickly after long days, knowing families would eat well despite tight budgets. Cabbage and noodles represented the best of immigrant thrift cooking, proving simple ingredients handled with care create genuine satisfaction. Frozen fruit salad was a refreshing dish that perfectly suited hot summer days, requiring little more than a freezer and a few canned goods. Made by folding whipped cream or mayonnaise into a mixture of canned fruit, marshmallows, and sometimes nuts, it was spooned into molds or loaf pans before being frozen. Once sliced, it revealed colorful pieces of fruit suspended in a creamy base, making it both pretty and satisfying. Families loved it because it could be made ahead of time and served straight from the freezer, saving stress during big gatherings. In community cookbooks, frozen fruit salad was often promoted as a light dessert or a fancy salad to accompany savory meals at potlucks. Children enjoyed the sweet flavors, while adults appreciated its coolness and novelty. Its versatility allowed cooks to adjust the ingredients depending on what was on hand, whether it was cherries, peaches, or pineapple. Today, it may seem unusual to freeze something called a salad, but in its time, it was a clever, thrifty way to stretch ingredients and create a dish that delighted guests. Number 13, beans and weenies. A can of pork and beans, a handful of hot dogs sliced thin, a squirt of yellow mustard, a tablespoon of brown sugar, and sometimes a strip or two of bacon laid across the top, into a pot or a baking dish at 350 for half an hour. That was supper in working-class households from New England to the Pacific Northwest every Saturday night for 30 years. In Boston and Portland, Maine, this tradition ran deep enough that Saturday was simply called Frank and Bean Night in many households. Van Camp's pork and beans sold for 21 cents a can in 1961. A package of 8 hot dogs was 29 cents. 6 people could eat for under 60 cents. Your father called it a good supper. Your mother called it Saturday. It was both, and it wasn't fancy. It didn't try to be. And on Sunday, if there were leftovers, you ate them cold on white bread with yellow mustard, and nobody complained. Cowboy stew is a really romantic dish. It's something right out of the actual American West, and cowboys did genuinely make this dish so much they forever stuck the label onto it too. What is it? It's a stew. A cowboy stew. What does that really mean, though? Well, as is pretty characteristic of cowboys and their lifestyle, it means going with the flow and using whatever you have next to you to the best of your ability. Cowboy stew wasn't something that only cowboys ate back then, though. It was a substantial meal even for churches. Know why? Because it took almost nothing to make it, and the dish had this rustic, make-do charm to it that really put you in what the kids today would call the grind set. Why would a dish do that? Picture yourself in their shoes. You're a middle-class worker in the 1960s, and things are getting rough with money again. It's not like financial security is a year-round, 24/7 concept, right? You use what you can because tomorrow you know you have to go back to work. You get a bare-bones stew that pulls together some respectable flavor for the amount of ingredients and the quality it's working with, and it kind of brightens your day, puts some energy back into you, and lets you go tackle on another shift. It caught on, really. The argument over where it started has been going since before the Civil War and has never been settled. Brunswick County, Virginia claims it. Brunswick, Georgia claims it too. What both versions agree on: an iron pot, a fire outdoors, and a community gathered around the cooking. Original Brunswick stew, documented before the Civil War, used squirrel and rabbit cooked down with fresh corn butter beans and tomatoes over a fire that burned most of the day. By the 20th century, squirrel had given way to chicken and pork. The beans came from a can, the tomatoes too. But the dish's logic remained. You made it outdoors. For more people than you could count, the recipe guarded by whoever had tended the pot longest. Church socials across Virginia and Georgia still ladled Brunswick stew from 50-gallon iron kettles into the 1970s. In the slow cooker today, scaled for one person eating alone, it carries the same memory forward. Shredded pork, shredded chicken, corn, butter beans, tomatoes, and Worcestershire, cooked until everything blurs into one smoky, communal thing. Number 10. Biscuits and gravy. Flour, lard, and buttermilk for the biscuits. Sausage drippings, flour, and milk for the gravy. This was breakfast across the American South and Midwest for over a century. But when money got tight, the sausage disappeared, and what you had left was a flour gravy made from drippings and milk, poured over biscuits that cost almost nothing to make. In Appalachian homes, they called this sawmill gravy because that was what the men in the lumber camps ate before dawn. A batch of biscuits cost about 7 cents in 1939. The gravy cost even less because it was made from scraps that most people would have thrown away. A woman in rural Tennessee once said that biscuits and gravy was not a recipe. It was a promise. A promise that no matter how bad things got, there would be something hot on the table in the morning. Number 18. Tomato gravy on biscuits. In the mountains of North Carolina and Southwest Virginia, tomato gravy was the summer answer to sausage gravy. When fresh tomatoes came off the vine in July and August, you chopped them and cooked them down in a skillet with a little bacon fat and flour until they thickened into a loose brick red sauce. You ladled it over warm biscuits and called it breakfast or supper depending on what time it was. In the fall, when the fresh tomatoes were gone, you used a can of whole tomatoes and the gravy tasted almost the same. A bushel of garden tomatoes in rural Virginia in 1963 cost almost nothing because your grandmother grew them herself in a plot behind the house. A 5-pound bag of self-rising flour ran about 35 cents. Tomato gravy was the dish that used up what the garden gave in abundance and made it into something a family of 7 could share. The biscuits soaked up every drop. Nothing was left in the pan. The steam table was the heart of every factory cafeteria, a long stainless steel counter fitted with rectangular wells of hot water, each one holding a deep pan of something cooking since before dawn. The beef stew sat in the center well because it moved the fastest. Carrots, potatoes, onions, and chunks of beef that had started tough and gone soft after hours of low heat, swimming in a dark broth, thickened with flour and seasoned with enough salt to keep a man on his feet. By the mid-70s, sneeze guards had become mandatory in most states. Massachusetts ordered them for every cafeteria in 1975, and the glass shield became as familiar as the food behind it. But before the guards went up, you could lean over that stew and let the steam hit your face, and the older workers swore that was the best part of lunch, standing in line, breathing it in, letting the heat cut through whatever the shop floor had done to them. The stew never changed. The men who ate it did. Navy bean soup simmered for hours and filled a house with the kind of smell that made you think everything might turn out fine. The beans, small, white, dense, were a staple of government relief programs, distributed in bulk because they cost almost nothing, carried real protein, and lasted months in a dry pantry without refrigeration. You soaked them overnight, then cooked them low and slow with whatever pork you had. A ham hock, a chunk of salt pork, a few strips of bacon already used once for grease. The fat rendered into the broth and turned plain water into something rich and smoky. Onions went in early. A carrot or celery went in too if you had them, but the soup worked without either. Boston cooks baked their beans with blackstrap molasses and a streak of mustard and called it something else, but the bones of the recipe were the same: beans, water, thyme, and scraps of pork. The dish got its name from U.S. Navy mess halls where it had been served since the early 1900s. One pot fed a household for 2 days, and by the third it was more broth than bean, stretched thin with a torn piece of bread. Stuffed cabbage rolls carried old-world traditions into American kitchens where ground beef met resourcefulness. Grandmothers blanched whole cabbage heads until the leaves softened enough to peel away, then filled each leaf with ground beef, cooked rice, onion, and seasoning. The rolls were tucked snugly into Dutch ovens, covered with tomato sauce stretched from canned tomatoes. Hours of slow baking transformed the rolls into tender parcels where the beef melded with sweetened cabbage and tangy sauce. One head of cabbage and a pound of beef could feed a family for 2 days when the rice stretched the filling properly. Eastern European immigrant families brought these recipes in their memories, adapting them without ever writing anything down. The rolls appeared at Sunday dinners and holiday tables, marking special occasions without breaking the budget. Leftover rolls reheated beautifully, often tasting better the second day. This was the food of grandmothers who remembered scarcity. Creamed corn was summer captured in a skillet, made from ears picked just hours before cooking. Grandmas cut kernels from cobs using sharp knives, then scraped the cobs with the blades back to extract the milky liquid that would thicken the dish naturally. The corn went into a skillet with butter, cooked slowly until the starch is released and the mixture became creamy without any flour or cream added. Salt and pepper were the only seasonings because fresh corn needed nothing else to taste like pure summer sweetness. Some grandmas added a splash of bacon grease for richness, while others kept it simple with just butter. The dish appeared at every summer supper during corn season, served alongside fried chicken, sliced tomatoes, and whatever else the garden provided. Children helped shuck corn on back porches, racing to see who could remove the silk fastest, knowing that creamed corn was their reward for the tedious work. Akutak, often called Eskimo ice cream, was a whipped mixture of animal fat, berries, and sometimes fish that became beloved celebration food across Arctic communities. Women beat rendered caribou or seal fat until light and fluffy, then folded in whatever berries the short summer provided. Crowberries, salmon berries, and blueberries were most common, their tartness cutting through rich fat to create something surprisingly refreshing. Some families added shredded dried fish or fresh snow to lighten texture further. The dish was served at festivals, after successful hunts, and during visits between traveling families. Children eagerly awaited their portion, knowing creamy sweetness was a rare treat in land where sugar did not exist. Akutak stored well in frozen caches, allowing families to enjoy summer bounty throughout dark winter months. Each family had their own variation and preferred fat-to-berry ratio, making every batch a signature creation. This was dessert born of necessity, transformed into pure joy. Milk toast with soft-boiled egg was the gentle meal that comforted seniors when their stomachs couldn't handle heavier fare. Slices of bread were toasted golden, placed in a shallow bowl, then covered with warm milk seasoned with butter and salt. A soft-boiled egg with runny yolk was placed alongside or sliced directly onto the milk-soaked toast. The combination was easy to chew, easy to digest, and surprisingly satisfying despite its plainness. During the 1940s and 1950s, doctors often prescribed milk toast for patients recovering from illness, and many seniors continued eating it simply because it felt nurturing. The warm milk absorbed into the toast, creating something between soup and bread pudding, while the egg provided protein that helped rebuild strength. This meal required minimal preparation and could be made even when exhaustion or illness made standing at the stove difficult. For elderly men and women living alone, milk toast represented self-care in its simplest form. Creamed peas on toast was a weeknight staple that housewives assembled in minutes without measuring cups or recipe cards. A can of peas was drained and stirred into a simple white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk, whisked together until thick. The creamy mixture was spooned over slices of toasted bread, creating a meal that satisfied hungry families when the grocery budget ran thin. This dish appeared on tables across America during the early 50s, especially toward the end of the month when paychecks stretched tight. Housewives made the white sauce by feel, knowing exactly when the flour was cooked enough and the milk had thickened properly. The peas added color and sweetness while the toast soaked up every drop. Some mothers added diced hard-boiled eggs when extra protein was needed. The dish represented practical cooking at its finest, turning pantry basics into something that tasted far better than its humble ingredients suggested. Creamed peas on toast has quietly disappeared from family tables. Tamale pie brought Southwestern flavors to blue-collar tables without requiring the time or skill that authentic tamales demanded. This casserole layered seasoned ground beef with tomatoes, corn, olives, and spices beneath a golden cornmeal crust that baked up crispy on top while staying soft underneath. Working mothers appreciated that it came together quickly, used inexpensive ingredients, and fed large families from a single dish. The cornmeal topping, made with milk, eggs, and sometimes cheese, puffed slightly in the oven and absorbed the spiced meat juices bubbling below. Children loved the mild heat and the contrast between soft filling and firmer crust. The dish represented practical adaptation of ethnic cuisines into forms that fit American kitchens and budgets. Church cookbooks featured countless variations, some adding beans, others incorporating enchilada sauce. Tamale pie was filling, flavorful, and affordable, yet it has largely vanished from modern family casserole rotations. Seafoam salad was a light and airy dish that brought together flavors and textures in a way that fascinated mid-century cooks. Using lime jello as a base, it combined cream cheese, whipped cream, and crushed pears into a frothy, fluffy creation that almost melted in the mouth. Its pale green color gave it an ethereal quality, leading to its whimsical name. This was the kind of recipe that felt special without being difficult. Perfect for bridge club luncheons, bridal showers, or summer gatherings. Its sweetness was balanced by the slight tang of the cream cheese, creating a dish that was more sophisticated than many other gelatin salads of the time. The combination of canned pears and packaged gelatin made it easy to assemble quickly, which was a major draw for busy homemakers. Though few people make seafoam salad today, it stands as an example of the playful experimentation that defined American cooking in the 1950s and 60s, when presentation and creativity mattered as much as practicality. Number 18. Potato and onion skillet hash. 4 potatoes, 1 onion, bacon grease in the bottom of a cast iron skillet. Your mother sliced the potatoes thin so they cooked fast, laid them flat in the hot grease and pressed them down with a spatula, then left them alone long enough to brown before she turned them. The onions went in halfway through, softening and turning sweet against the crust that had formed on the potatoes. Salt, pepper. That was all it needed. 1 pan, 1 flame. Under a dime. Under a dime. Nothing wasted. In rural communities across Tennessee and Kentucky, fried potatoes and onions was the supper that appeared when there was nothing in the house but the potato sack and the onion bin. A pound of potatoes cost about 5 cents in 1964. The skillet was ready in 20 minutes. Everyone ate until the pan was clean. No stove required beyond a flame and patience. No pots to wash but one. I'll forgive you for thinking this is another showcase of how we tried to copy other countries' culinary mojo, because Swiss steak does sound pretty well Swiss. What might raise your eyebrow is that this is actually a purely American dish. It involved braising, which is a kind of slow cooking that tenderizes any cut of meat to the maximum, and this one involved a round steak in a tomato-based sauce with bell peppers. It was a pretty big classic in the 30s and 40s. Whenever people could afford to get some cuts of meat, they were usually cheap, and as a result, they were more than likely to be tough ones. A dish like this that could take even rubber disguised as beef and turn it into a buttery, smooth steak was a godsend in those times. The fact that it didn't need a lot of work on the side to make it shine also meant that it was something the populace could really jibe with, and slow cooker meant that you could braise away without worry. It wasn't one of the most popular steaks ever. And of course, if you were working with recipes that were centered around making better cuts of meat shine, you'd probably get a more decent steak experience, but it was a homely meal to have after a tough shift or a day spent taking care of the kids. Can anyone ask for more relief? Especially when cooking, it became a non-issue later on. During the worst years of the Depression, men riding freight rails kept alive on a stew with one rule: no one eats alone and everyone contributes something. One man had a potato from a church garden. Another had dried beans he'd been carrying for 3 days. A third had trapped a rabbit near the rail yard. Everything went into one pot over an open fire. Food historians trace the name mulligan to Irish-American working-class communities in the late 19th century, where communal one-pot cooking was the practical answer to tenement poverty. By the 1930s, it had entered Dust Bowl oral history, the dish you made together, using whatever existed, without asking what was in it. In the slow cooker, mulligan stew becomes almost dignified, beef and chicken together, potatoes, corn, and lima beans, simmering 8 hours into one unified flavor. What those men cooked over fires in vacant lots, a potato here, a bone there, fed a family of 6 for under $2. Number 18. Dandelion greens with bacon grease. After a long winter of potatoes, dried beans, and salt pork, the first dandelion greens in the yard were treated like a gift from the ground itself. Mabel Combs in Letcher County, Kentucky, sent her children out every April with paper sacks to pick the young leaves before they turned bitter. She piled them in a bowl, poured hot bacon grease straight from the morning skillet over the top, and added a splash of vinegar. That was the whole recipe: greens that cost nothing, fat from the morning bacon, a sharp bite from whatever was in the pantry. In Appalachia and across Pennsylvania Dutch country, families had been eating dandelion greens this way for generations. Old-timers called them a spring tonic. They believed the bitterness cleaned the blood after months of heavy winter food. Whether that was true or not, the craving was real. Dandelion greens grew in every yard, every ditch, every cracked sidewalk in every town in America. A woman in Scranton, Pennsylvania, told her daughter that picking dandelions was the first chore she ever gave her children. She wanted them to understand that food did not always come from a store. Sometimes it came from the ground right under their feet. That lesson does not expire. Number 24. Bread and milk. A bowl, a few slices of day-old bread torn into pieces, warm milk poured over the top, and sometimes a pinch of sugar if anyone thought to add it. That was supper. In rural homes across Tennessee, Kentucky, and the Ozarks of southern Missouri, bread and milk was the meal that appeared when the money ran out and the week had not ended yet. The bread swelled soft in the warm milk, going almost custard-like if you let it sit long enough. A loaf of bread cost 22 cents in 1962. A quart of milk was 25 cents. For a family of 6, that is dinner for under 50 cents. No stove required. No pots to wash. Old-timers across the southern mountains still eat a bowl of bread and milk before bed the way their grandmothers did. Not because they have to, because it tastes like safety. The cafeteria ran bean soup on Wednesdays because the ham bones from Monday's lunch had been simmering since dawn, and by midweek the broth was dark and thick and impossible to shortcut. Navy beans or Great Northerns, a few chunks of carrot, and the ham bone sitting at the bottom of the pot like an anchor. The cornbread came from a sheet pan, cut in squares, dense and golden with a crust that crumbled when you broke it and a center warm enough to melt the margarine they left in foil packets at the end of the line. This was Depression-era logic carried into a 1973 assembly plant. Stretch the protein, fill the belly, waste nothing. A bowl and 2 squares of cornbread cost less than $1, and it outweighed half the menu. The men who grew up on it understood what it meant to eat well on almost nothing. Hot water cornbread needed no oven, no eggs, and no milk, just cornmeal, boiling water, salt, and hands tough enough to shape the dough while it was still hot. You poured boiling water over the cornmeal and stirred fast, then scooped the mixture and patted it between your palms into flat rounds the size of your hand. Each patty went into a skillet of hot lard and fried until the outside turned dark gold and the inside stayed dense and steaming. The sound told you when the grease was right. A hard sizzle meant go, and if it popped too loud, you pulled back and waited. In rural homes across the South during the 1930s, these showed up at every meal, with beans, with greens, with gravy, or alone. The shaping was everything. Too thick and the center stayed raw, too thin and they fell apart. Your hands just knew. Gravy from pan drippings was an art form that transformed every meat dish into something extraordinary. After frying chicken, pork chops, or country ham, grandmas never washed the skillet. That fond stuck to the bottom was liquid gold waiting to be unlocked. Flour went into the hot fat, stirred constantly with a wooden spoon until it turned golden brown and smelled like toasted nuts. Milk or water was added slowly, the mixture thickening as grandmas stirred with the patience that only years of practice could teach. The gravy absorbed all the flavors left in the pan, becoming silky and rich without any seasoning beyond salt and pepper. It was poured over biscuits for breakfast, mashed potatoes for supper, and sometimes eaten straight from the spoon when no one was watching. No two batches tasted exactly alike because the meat changed, the drippings varied, and grandmas adjusted by instinct rather than recipe. This gravy tied meals together and made simple food feel abundant. Fermented walrus, known as iguanak, was aged meat that developed complex flavors through controlled decomposition in underground caches. Hunters buried portions in permafrost pits lined with grass, where cold temperatures allowed slow fermentation without dangerous rot. The process took weeks or months, transforming fresh meat into something pungent, tangy, and deeply satisfying to those raised on it. Outsiders found the smell overwhelming, but Inuit families considered well-fermented walrus a delicacy for special occasions. Fermentation broke down proteins into easily digestible forms, providing nutrition fresh meat could not match. Elders judged readiness by smell and texture, knowing exactly when aging reached perfection. Children learned to appreciate fermented foods early. Understanding this was how ancestors survived when hunting was impossible. The taste was strong, almost cheese-like in complexity, carrying depth only time and tradition could create. Fermented walrus connected families to Arctic wisdom. Stewed chicken backs and necks delivered rich, meaty flavor from parts most people overlooked. Butchers sold these bony pieces for almost nothing, knowing only resourceful cooks understood their potential. Seniors would simmer the backs and necks slowly with onion, celery, and herbs until the meat fell from the bones and the broth turned golden. The resulting stew was served over rice or biscuits, the rich gravy coating everything with savory goodness. The meat itself was surprisingly tender, having spent hours absorbing flavors from slow cooking. For seniors on fixed incomes, these neglected chicken parts provided complete protein at a fraction of breast or thigh prices. The bones contributed gelatin that made the broth silky and helped soothe aging joints. Many elderly cooks would pick through the stew, removing bones and reserving meat for sandwiches the next day. This dish required patience rather than skill, making it perfect for seniors who had time but limited energy for complicated cooking. Fried cornmeal mush was a breakfast housewives made from the simplest ingredients, cooking cornmeal in water until thick, then chilling it overnight before slicing and frying. The mush was poured into a loaf pan after cooking, where it set into a firm block that could be sliced the next morning. Each slice was fried in butter or bacon drippings until golden and crispy on both sides, the exterior crackling while the inside stayed soft. Housewives served it with maple syrup or alongside eggs and bacon for a hearty morning meal. The technique required no recipe because the proportions were simple, and the method was learned by watching. Cornmeal was cheap and filling, making this dish a budget-friendly way to feed hungry families before school. Children loved the contrast between crispy edges and tender centers. This dish stretched back generations, connecting 50s families to grandparents who survived harder times. Fried cornmeal mush has nearly vanished from modern breakfast tables. City chicken contained no chicken at all. It was cubed pork or veal, threaded onto wooden skewers to resemble drumsticks, breaded and fried or baked until golden brown. This Depression-era invention persisted through the 1970s in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and other industrial cities, where immigrant families had perfected the recipe generations earlier. The name came from a time when chicken was expensive and pork was cheap, so frugal cooks created an imitation that became beloved in its own right. The cubes were dredged in seasoned flour or cracker crumbs, then browned before finishing in the oven with gravy. The skewers made the dish fun and portable. Children could eat them like drumsticks, while adults appreciated the tender meat. Polish, Slovak, and Italian families each claimed their own variations. City chicken represented the ingenuity of working-class cooks who transformed humble ingredients into something almost celebratory. This dish has nearly vanished outside ethnic enclaves. California gelatin salad represented the American obsession with Jell-O in its most inventive form, blending sweet and savory in ways that were once celebrated but now seem unusual. This salad began with a citrus-flavored gelatin base, often lemon or lime, which was set with shredded cabbage and celery folded through for crunch. Pineapple chunks added a burst of sweetness that offset the tangy gelatin, creating a dish that was refreshing and light. The bright colors and unusual combination made it a common centerpiece on buffet tables and potlucks, where guests admired its shimmering surface. It reflected a period when gelatin was a canvas for creativity and nearly any ingredient could be encased in its wobbling form. For homemakers, California gelatin salad was a reliable dish that was easy to prepare ahead of time and looked far more complicated than it was. Today it might raise eyebrows for its odd balance of vegetables and sweet gelatin, but in its time it was a prized recipe clipped from community cookbooks and passed between neighbors who wanted something different for their tables. Number 16. Hamburger gravy over rice. A quarter pound of ground beef, browned in the skillet with a diced onion until it broke into crumbles. A spoonful of flour stirred in to make a roux with the drippings. Beef broth or water added slowly, stirred until a thin brown gravy formed around the meat. Poured over white rice that had been cooked while the gravy came together. In the farming communities of the Mississippi Delta and the rural counties of Arkansas, this was called hamburger gravy, and it was understood that 1/4 pound of meat could feed a family of 5 over rice without anyone walking away hungry. Ground beef cost 49 cents a pound in 1965. A cup of dry rice cost less than a dime. 4 people full for under 30 cents a serving. There is no restaurant in America that has figured out how to charge for that ratio. There never will be. The math doesn't work in their favor. Arroz con pollo is a treasured dish rooted in Spanish culture, delighting taste buds and gracing dinner tables for countless generations. More than just a meal, arroz con pollo brings warmth, comfort, and nostalgia with every bite. It embodies the simple pleasures that food can bring, comfort found not in someone's shoulder or at the bottom of a bottle, but in something as humble as rice. When topped with tender, perfectly seasoned chicken, this dish has a way of grounding you, reminding you of life's small, genuine joys. It's for those who find solace in food, in the gathering of loved ones, and in flavors that speak of tradition. Arroz con pollo is an invitation to relax, indulge, and reconnect. If that resonates, then this dish was always meant for you, promising satisfaction, warmth, and the perfect blend of flavor in every bite. Cities like Miami and New York were some of the first places where Caribbean culture touched down and made a name for itself. In terms of the middle class, it was a pretty economic and practical dish. You had all your health-related needs covered, and it didn't cost much at all, with an entire family meal costing maybe $4 or $5. Even less, actually, since one of the key highlights of this dish was its ability to turn a bit of chicken into a show stealer. A lot of dishes make ample use of protein and meat, but they often don't optimize each lb of beef or chicken in there, so you get a lot of bites that feel extra gamey or chewy and don't have enough flavor. That's not something you have to worry about with arroz con pollo, and that's why it's still a pretty popular dish even today, especially now that slow cookers are in an entirely different league than what they used to be when they were first introduced to the general public. Nobody outside the family knew what to call it. You said slumgullion because your grandmother said it, and she said it because her mother did. And somewhere in the 1840s, an Irishman coined the word, from slum meaning slime and gullion meaning cesspool, because the stew looked like a wreck and tasted like a revelation. Merriam-Webster recorded the term in 1890 as a meat stew. By the Depression, it had become ground beef, elbow macaroni, and tomato sauce cooked down until the pasta absorbed everything. Your neighbor called it American goulash. The firehouse called it chop suey. In Columbus, Ohio, it was Johnny Marzetti, named after a restaurant owner who popularized the dish in the 1920s. None of those were exactly the same recipe. All of them were the same meal. You browned a pound of beef, added tomatoes and broth, dropped in the dry elbows, turned the slow cooker to low. 8 hours later, the macaroni had absorbed every bit of fat and sweetness, and a cheap pound of beef had stretched to feed 6. Number 17. Rice and gravy. In South Louisiana, this was not a side dish. It was the center of the plate. White rice, a dark roux made from flour and fat. Whatever leftover drippings or scraps of meat could be worked into the gravy. Cajun and Creole families stretched a single chicken across 3 or 4 meals this way. The bones went into stock, the drippings went into gravy. The rice soaked it all up. In 1947, a 25-pound bag of rice cost about $1.50 in Lake Charles. That bag lasted a month. A widow in Abbeville, Louisiana, later told her granddaughter that she ate rice and gravy for dinner every night for 2 years after her husband died. She said it was not sad. It was just the way things were. Number 16. Fried bologna sandwich. You are either nodding right now, or you have never been to rural Ohio. Your mother laid a slice of bologna flat in a hot skillet with no oil because bologna makes its own. The center puffed up like a dome while the edges curled and browned, and a ring of char formed around the outside. She popped the bubble in the center with a fork, let it lie flat again, flipped it once, and slid it onto white bread with a stripe of yellow mustard, and sometimes a slice of American cheese melted on top. In western Pennsylvania and the Appalachian communities of eastern Ohio and West Virginia, fried bologna was not a joke food. It was dinner. Bologna kept well in the icebox, cost much less per pound than any cut of meat, and could feed a family with a single package. Schools in the South served bologna cups in their lunch programs in 1963. Fried slices formed into little cups, mashed potatoes spooned inside, cheese on top. The children ate every bite and didn't notice they were eating poor. That is the best kind of cooking. It came north with the workers who came north, Southern men and women who followed the factory jobs to Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana during the 40s and 50s, bringing a way of cooking that ran on cast iron, hot oil, and flour dredge. Chicken fried steak was a cheap cut of round, pounded thin until the fibers broke, dipped in egg and seasoned flour, and fried until the crust went golden and cracked when you cut into it. The gravy was made in the same pan, drippings, flour, milk, black pepper, nothing else. Factory cafeterias picked it up because the ingredients cost almost nothing. By the 70s, it sat in the rotation alongside Salisbury steak and roast beef. But the men from Tennessee and Alabama could always tell the difference between the cafeteria version and the one their mothers made. The crust was never quite as crisp, the gravy never quite as peppery, and the kitchen it came from never smelled like home. Cornbread crumbled in cold buttermilk was the meal that needed no stove, no reheating, and no explanation if you came from the right kitchen. You baked it in a cast iron skillet greased with lard, and if you were from the South, you left the sugar out entirely. Appalachian cooks used no leavening at all, just ground corn, hot water, and rendered fat, pressed flat and cooked until the edges cracked. That night or the next morning, you broke the cold bread into a tall glass, poured buttermilk over it, and ate it with a spoon. The tangy milk softened the crumble into something almost creamy. Every household had their own way. Some added salt, others a drizzle of sorghum, and a northern version might have honey stirred in. That one difference could tell you exactly where someone came from. You never asked for the recipe. You watched and you remembered. Beef and noodle casserole was the covered dish that showed up at every church potluck and neighborhood gathering. Ground beef was browned with onions, combined with egg noodles and canned cream of mushroom soup, then baked until bubbling and golden on top. The soup created a creamy sauce that held everything together while the noodles absorbed those beefy flavors. Crushed potato chips or buttered breadcrumbs went on top for crunch, turning a simple casserole into something children fought over. This was the dish grandmothers made when feeding a crowd or when grieving families needed meals delivered. The casserole traveled well in foil-covered pans and reheated without losing its appeal. 1 pound of beef stretched to serve 12 when the noodles and soup did their work. Families relied on it for weeknight suppers assembled in minutes. The recipe existed only in memory, adjusted each time based on what the pantry held. Chicken and dumplings stretched one bird into a feast that satisfied everyone at the table. Grandmas started with old hens past their laying days, birds too tough for frying but perfect for the long, slow simmer that turned their meat tender and their bones into rich broth. The whole chicken went into the pot with onion, celery, and whatever herbs grew near the back door. After hours of simmering, the meat was pulled from bones by hands that knew every joint and sinew. The dumplings were mixed by feel, flour, lard, and buttermilk combined until the dough felt right between fingers. Dropped by spoonfuls into bubbling broth, they puffed into pillowy clouds that absorbed the chicken's essence. Some grandmas rolled their dumplings flat and cut them into strips, while others preferred the drop method their own grandmothers used. The dish needed no seasoning beyond salt and pepper because the bird and broth provided everything. Arctic char, a cold water fish related to salmon, provided essential variety in Inuit diet and could be prepared dozens of different ways. Families caught char during summer runs when fish crowded rivers, netting enough to preserve for winter. Fresh char was eaten raw as sashimi-like slices, the pink flesh clean and delicate. Dried char became travel food. Smoked char added richness to winter meals, and frozen char was shaved into thin curls eaten like chips. Women rendered char oil for cooking and lamp fuel, while skin was sometimes used for waterproof containers. The fish provided omega-3 fatty acids crucial for surviving extreme cold, feeding both body and brain. Children often caught their first char young, learning fishing skills that would sustain them throughout life. Char runs meant celebration, with families gathering at traditional spots used by ancestors for generations. Every preparation method honored the fish that helped their people survive the harshest environment on Earth. Cottage cheese with canned peaches was the lunch that required no cooking, no planning, and almost no cleanup. Exactly what seniors needed when energy ran low. A scoop of cottage cheese provided complete protein and calcium without the heaviness of meat, while canned peaches in syrup added natural sweetness and vitamins. The combination could be assembled in under a minute using nothing more than a bowl and spoon, perfect for hot summer days when heating the kitchen seemed unbearable. During the 1960s, cottage cheese was marketed specifically to older Americans as a healthy, digestible protein source. The peach's gentle sweetness balanced the cottage cheese's tang, creating a satisfying meal that felt almost like dessert. Seniors often ate this 3 or 4 times weekly, sometimes adding cinnamon or crushed walnuts for variety. It was sustenance without fuss, dignity without struggle, and proof that eating well alone didn't require slaving over a hot stove or complicated preparations. Wacky cake was a chocolate cake housewives made during the war years and kept making through the 50s because it required no eggs, butter, or milk. The recipe was mixed directly in the baking pan, creating 3 wells in the dry ingredients where vinegar, vanilla, and oil were poured before water was added. The chemical reaction between vinegar and baking soda made the cake rise without eggs, producing a tender crumb. Housewives memorized the proportions because the recipe was so simple and the results so reliable. The cake was moist and chocolatey, perfect for school lunches or weeknight desserts when fancier cakes seemed like too much work. Some called it crazy cake, but every version used the same basic technique of mixing in the pan. Children never knew they were eating a Depression-era survival recipe because it tasted just as good as any layer cake. Wacky cake represented ingenuity, proving that limitations could produce something genuinely delicious. This clever cake has faded from memory. American goulash bore little resemblance to its Hungarian namesake, but it became a lifeline for working-class families stretching ground beef through the week. This one-pot wonder combined elbow macaroni, ground beef, canned tomatoes, and whatever vegetables needed using up, all simmered together until the flavors melded into something greater than its parts. Mothers across factory towns made enormous batches on Sunday, knowing leftovers would feed families through Wednesday. The dish cost pennies per serving, yet delivered protein, carbohydrates, and vegetables in every bowl. Children came home from school to find it warming on the stove, its tomato-rich aroma filling modest kitchens. The beauty was its flexibility. Some added corn, others stirred in cheese, and many adjusted spices to family preferences. It required no special equipment, just a large pot and basic pantry staples. Today, American goulash has largely disappeared from family tables, replaced by convenience foods that cannot match its economical warmth. Frog eye salad was one of those whimsical creations that could only have been born in mid-century kitchens, where experimentation with canned goods and pantry shortcuts was a point of pride. Made with tiny azzini di pepe pasta that resembled frog eyes, the dish was anything but intimidating. It was sweet, pastel-colored, and surprisingly light. Home cooks would mix the pasta with canned fruit like pineapple and mandarin oranges, fold in whipped topping, and stir through mini marshmallows to give it extra sweetness. It was the kind of dish that children loved to scoop onto their plates, while adults appreciated its unexpected texture. At potlucks or family reunions, frog eye salad often stood out for its cheerful appearance, sometimes tinted with pastel food coloring to match the season. Despite its unusual name, it was beloved for its playful charm and nostalgic sweetness. And though it may sound strange to modern tastes, for many families it was a reminder of togetherness, creativity, and the quirky joy of 1960s and 70s cooking. Number 22. Tomato gravy on biscuits. When the garden exploded with tomatoes in August and there was nothing else ready to pick, a woman in rural Tennessee or the upland counties of Georgia made tomato gravy. She melted bacon grease in a skillet, added a spoonful of flour and let it brown, then poured in garden tomatoes she had crushed by hand, salt, a pinch of sugar, black pepper. She stirred it until the flour and tomatoes became something thicker, tangier, and more satisfying than either one alone. Poured over split biscuits, it was a full meal. By mid-September, when the tomatoes were coming in faster than they could be canned, families ate this 4 or 5 nights running. It did not feel like poverty food when the tomatoes were that ripe. It felt like the best time of the year. Healthy, filling, free from the garden. Appalachian communities still make tomato gravy today. They don't call it poverty food. They call it summer. Navy bean soup, as the name implies, is one right out of the cookbooks of the military. See, all those soldiers get so awfully tired from traveling to other countries all of the time, they end up needing soups filled with ham and cured pork to put some pep in their step. Navy bean soup was particularly nice for 2 reasons. It was already cheap, which was kind of the theme of the time with the World Wars. But even after that, the habit of rationing and using cheap ingredients for military ventures didn't really go away. Anything that cuts costs, right? Navy bean soup definitely knew how to save money. And once slow cookers became a thing, it was saving time too. The second reason is that it was pretty easy to make wherever you were, and it was easy to carry around too, in pots or a thermos. This meant that it was the perfect military food. Healthy, easy to make in bulk, and easy to carry around. Don't think it takes a genius to figure out why they abused this recipe to the moon and back. And that same knowledge, what a discarded cut could become after a full day in the pot, lived most powerfully in ham hocks, slow-cooked with turnip greens until the pot liquor ran dark as strong tea and the greens had surrendered every bit of bitterness to the cured meat. Ham hocks are the smoked, cured lower leg joints of a pig. Bone, cartilage, thin flesh, sold cheap because they needed 8 hours of low, slow heat to become edible. The pot liquor, the dark, mineral-rich liquid left in the crock when the greens were done, was consumed separately, ladled over cornbread or drunk straight from a cup, because the old women knew it held everything the greens had released. You never discarded pot liquor. That was not a preference. It was law, passed down without being written. If you had to ask whether you could throw it out, you hadn't grown up in the right kitchen. She never measured a thing she put in that pot. Nobody who made this well ever did. Number 12, buttered egg noodles. Egg noodles, butter, salt. That is the whole recipe. You boiled the noodles, drained them, dropped in a lump of butter, and tossed it all together. In the 1950s, mothers who had nothing else in the pantry put this on the table and watched their children eat it like it was the best thing they had ever tasted. A bag of egg noodles cost about 20 cents. A stick of butter cost around 15 cents. For 35 cents total, you could feed 3 or 4 people. It was not exciting. It was not pretty. It was warm and filling, and it took less than 10 minutes. Children who grew up on buttered noodles did not know their families were struggling. They just knew they liked dinner. Years later, when those same children had money and options, many of them still made buttered egg noodles on the nights when nothing else felt right. Number 23. Cornmeal mush. On cold winter mornings across Iowa and Indiana, farmhouse kitchens smelled like nothing else. Your mother had started the pot the night before, stirring cornmeal into salted water over low heat until it thickened into something almost solid. By morning, it had set in the pan, and she sliced it cold, laid the pieces in bacon grease in the skillet, and fried it until the outside turned crispy and golden. You brought it to the table dripping with butter and maple syrup, or you ate it plain with nothing but salt. A 10-pound bag of cornmeal cost 53 cents in 1960. That bag could produce a week of breakfasts. In Amish and Mennonite communities across Ohio and Indiana, cornmeal mush stayed on the menu long after more prosperous times arrived, not because families still had to eat it, but because they had grown to love it. Jackson Cornmeal Mush, an Indianapolis company founded in 1896, sold the product pre-made in the refrigerated section of Midwest grocery stores for decades. Your grandmother knew what she was doing. The mush was better than the cereal in the box. Long before the brake cart rolled through, the cafeteria line was already set, and the most reliable thing on it was Salisbury steak. The patty was ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs and onion powder, pressed flat on a sheet pan, baked in rows, and served under a ladle of brown mushroom gravy from a number 10 can. The mashed potatoes beside it were instant, reconstituted from flakes with hot water and margarine. The dish had a medical name because it was one. Dr. James Salisbury promoted the ground beef patty in the 1880s as a cure for everything from gout to heart trouble. By the 70s, his name had been reduced to a banquet frozen dinner label and a steam table card. But it worked. It was protein, it was warm, and it came with enough gravy to make the texture irrelevant. Men who had been running presses all morning didn't need elegance. They needed it ready. Spanish rice with ground beef brought warmth and color to tables across America during the mid-century years. Ground beef was browned with onions and green peppers. Then uncooked rice was stirred in and toasted slightly before canned tomatoes and water were added. The pot simmered covered until the rice absorbed all the liquid, turning tender and deeply flavored with tomato and beef. Cumin, chili powder, and garlic gave it warmth that made the kitchen smell like something special. This one-pot meal required no side dishes and could feed 6 people from a single pound of meat. Grandmothers learned it from neighbors, from church cookbooks, from watching their own mothers work without measuring spoons. The dish was forgiving, adjusting to whatever vegetables were available. Leftovers went into tortillas for lunch the next day, or were simply reheated with a splash of water. It represented practical cooking that turned cheap ingredients into something families genuinely craved. Poke salad was wild greens that grandmas gathered from ditches and field edges every spring. The young shoots were picked before they grew too tall, when their leaves were tender enough to eat after proper cooking. Grandmas knew which plants were safe. The knowledge passed down through generations who understood that improper preparation could make you sick. The greens were boiled in several changes of water to remove bitterness and any toxins, then drained and fried in bacon grease with scrambled eggs mixed in. Some families ate poke salad as a main dish with cornbread, while others served it as a side alongside other spring vegetables. Children learned to identify the plants during walks with their grandmothers, building knowledge that connected them to the land. This dish represented the ingenuity of country people who saw food where others saw weeds, turning what grew wild into meals that cost nothing but time and knowledge. Caribou tongue was considered one of the finest delicacies, prized for its tender texture and rich flavor that melted in the mouth. Hunters saved tongues from every kill, knowing this single organ could provide a meal that tasted almost luxurious. The tongue was typically boiled until the outer skin could be peeled away, revealing pink, succulent meat beneath. Families served tongue at celebrations, honoring successful hunters and welcoming visitors from distant camps. Children learned that tongue was special, not everyday food, reserved for moments worth remembering. The meat contained high concentrations of fat and protein, making it nutritionally valuable as well as delicious. Elders often received first portions as sign of respect, while younger family members waited their turn. Caribou tongue demonstrated that even in harsh environments, people found ways to create cuisine that went beyond mere survival. The silky texture and subtle gamey flavor made this a dish families looked forward to throughout long hunting seasons. Navy bean soup sustained countless seniors through cold winters when heating bills strained tight budgets. A pound of dried navy beans cost mere cents and could simmer all day on low heat, filling small apartments with warmth and fragrance. The preparation required nothing more than soaking beans overnight, then cooking them slowly with a ham bone, onion, and water until everything melted into creamy richness. The ham bone contributed smoky depth and gelatin that made the broth silky, while the beans provided complete protein when eaten with cornbread. Seniors living alone could make a single pot stretch across 4 or 5 days, reheating portions as needed. The soup actually improved with age, flavors deepening as it sat in the icebox overnight. This wasn't just economical eating. It was wise eating that required minimal effort while delivering maximum nourishment. For widows managing on Social Security checks, navy bean soup represented security in a bowl, warmth without worry. Wilted lettuce salad appeared on dinner tables, when garden lettuce grew faster than families could eat it fresh. Housewives tore crisp lettuce into a large bowl, then poured hot bacon drippings mixed with vinegar and sugar directly over the greens. The heat wilted the lettuce just enough to soften it, while the dressing created a tangy sweetness that balanced the smoky bacon flavor. Crumbled bacon pieces and sliced hard-boiled eggs topped the salad, transforming simple greens into something substantial. This was country cooking that required no recipe because farm wives had made it for generations. The proportions of vinegar to sugar varied by family taste, some preferring more tang while others liked it sweeter. The bacon grease had to be hot enough to wilt, but not so hot it cooked the lettuce completely. The salad was served immediately while still warm, before the lettuce became too soft. This dish has largely vanished as fresh salads and bottled dressings became standard fare. Porcupine meatballs got their playful name from the rice mixed into the meat, which poked out like little quills after cooking in tomato sauce. Working mothers loved this dish because it stretched a pound of ground beef into enough food for a family of 6 while adding extra carbohydrates. The meatballs were simple: ground beef mixed with raw rice, onion, egg, and seasonings, then browned and simmered in canned tomato soup thinned with water. As they cooked, the rice absorbed liquid and expanded, creating those distinctive spiky protrusions. Children found the name amusing and the taste familiar, making this an easy sell at family tables. The tomato sauce became rich and meaty during the simmer, perfect for spooning over mashed potatoes. Factory workers came home to find these waiting in covered skillets, still warm from afternoon cooking. This clever dish has largely disappeared from modern kitchens, though it once represented exactly the resourceful cooking that kept blue-collar families fed. Sunshine salad was the kind of dish that lived up to its name, bright, cheerful, and guaranteed to stand out on any buffet table. Made with orange jello, shredded carrots, and pineapple, it was a combination that balanced sweetness with a slight crunch. At church socials and community potlucks, this salad often carried a sense of cheer, its glowing orange hue making it instantly recognizable. For many families, it was a holiday tradition as well, showing up at Easter or Christmas dinners alongside more savory dishes. The sweetness of the pineapple helped mask the earthiness of the carrots, making it appealing to children and adults alike. Recipes often called for topping it with whipped cream or a light mayonnaise dressing, depending on whether the cook leaned sweet or savory. Though it might seem unusual today to mix carrots into gelatin, Sunshine salad reflects the creativity and practicality of mid-century homemakers who were eager to stretch ingredients and create something that was both inexpensive and memorable. Through the 1950s and 60s, pork neck bones were a butcher's discard, priced at pennies per pound because commercial processors had no use for them. African American and Appalachian cooks had understood something those processors overlooked. Neck bones are loaded with collagen. Simmered in a slow cooker for 8 hours with water, garlic, onion, and root vegetables, that collagen dissolved into the cooking liquid, turning thin water into something thick, glossy, and deeply savory. A gravy built from bones that cost almost nothing. The meat, threaded around the bones, became fall-apart tender and absorbed every bit of flavor from the surrounding broth. You ate it over rice, and the rice soaked up the neckbone gravy, and the combination stopped conversations. What the butcher gave away as worthless, the cook turned into something people drove across town for. Those who knew what to do with neck bones carried a knowledge most of the world had not yet caught up to. Number 24, cornmeal mush. If your grandmother grew up poor, she probably called this breakfast. In homes across Appalachia, the Ozarks, and the Deep South, cornmeal mush was the first thing a child learned to eat and the last thing a widow gave up. Cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt. Families stirred it on the stove until it thickened and ate it hot with whatever they had. Molasses, a pat of butter, bacon drippings. If there were leftovers, the mush went into a loaf pan, let it set overnight, sliced it in the morning, and fried it in lard until the edges went crisp and golden. In 1936, cornmeal cost about 15 cents for a 5-pound bag. That bag could feed a family for a week. Clara Canucciari, who later became famous for her depression cooking videos at age 93, remembered eating this as a girl in Chicago. She said nobody thought about what they were missing. They were just glad to have something hot. Number 20, Hoover stew. During the Depression, people named this after Herbert Hoover because they wanted him to know what they thought of his presidency. The name stuck through the 40s and 50s and 60s, passed along in mill towns across the Piedmont and steel neighborhoods in Pittsburgh and Gary. You made it with whatever canned goods were in the cupboard. Macaroni boiled in water, a can of tomatoes dumped in, hot dogs sliced into rounds, sometimes a can of corn, sometimes a can of green beans, whatever was on the shelf. The rule was simple: keep adding until the pot was full enough to feed whoever was at the table. A package of macaroni cost 9 cents in 1963. A can of tomatoes was 12 cents. Hot dogs ran about 30 cents for a package of 8. Dinner for 4 for under 50 cents. It was not pretty food, but it was hot and it was filling and it got everybody through another night. Families in the coal camps of Harlan County, Kentucky still remember the smell of it. The truck pulled into the lot around 11:30, and the horn was the only announcement it needed. They called them Roach Coaches, not because anyone loved the name, but because the reputation had stuck since the 50s, when catering trucks started parking outside shipyards with menus in grease pencil on the side panel. The chili was always the move. It came out of a steel pot bolted to the counter, ladled into a styrofoam cup with a plastic spoon jammed in, and it burned your hand through the cup before you got the first bite. Nobody asked what cut of meat was in it. The original mobile food service traced to 1872, when a man named Walter Scott parked a covered wagon outside a newspaper office in Providence, Rhode Island, and started selling sandwiches through a cutout window. 100 years later, the chili hadn't changed much. Thick, salty, heavy on the cumin. You ate it standing up in the parking lot, talking about overtime, and the wind carried the smell across the whole second shift. Dandelion greens came from the yard, the ditch, the empty lot. Anywhere the yellow flowers pushed through dirt. They were free, and during the Depression, free was its own food group. Italian immigrant households sautéed them with olive oil and garlic, and that simple habit kept them among the healthiest communities in the country during the worst years. Southern and Appalachian cooks boiled the greens 3 separate times in fresh water to draw out the bitterness, then dressed them with hot bacon grease and a splash of vinegar. The trick was picking them young, before the leaves turned tough. You went early in the morning when the dew was still on them, and kids learned to spot the jagged leaves from across the yard. Rich in iron and vitamins, dandelions kept people from malnutrition when grocery shelves sat empty and gardens had failed. Johnny Marzetti was the casserole that sustained Ohio church suppers and school cafeterias for decades. Ground beef was browned with onions and green peppers, then combined with cooked egg noodles, tomato sauce, and shredded cheese in deep baking pans. The casserole baked until the cheese melted and the edges bubbled with tomato sauce turned slightly caramelized. Named after a restaurant owner's brother, the dish spread through Midwestern communities via church cookbooks and school lunch programs. Grandmothers made it when they needed to feed 20 people without breaking the family budget. The recipe was infinitely adjustable. More noodles when money was tight, more beef when times were good. Mushrooms appeared in some versions, olives in others, but the core remained beef, noodles, tomato, and cheese. Children grew up eating this at potlucks and came home asking their mothers to make it. The casserole represented community cooking at its finest, adapted by every family who made it. Soup beans simmered all day on the back of wood stoves, filling homes with the earthy promise of supper. Grandmas sorted through dried pinto beans by hand, discarding stones and shriveled beans with practiced fingers that needed no light to work by. The beans soaked overnight in cold well water, then cooked slowly with a ham hock or piece of fatback that gave the broth its silky richness and depth. No recipe existed because none was needed. Grandmas knew by the smell when beans were ready, by the way they yielded to a wooden spoon pressed against the pot's side. The cooking liquid thickened into pot liquor so flavorful that families drank it straight from cups or sopped it up with bread. Beans were served over cornbread or rice, with chopped raw onion and a splash of vinegar on the table for those who wanted them. This single pot fed families for days, reheated each evening until nothing remained but memories. Canned mackerel cakes turned a humble tin of fish into golden, crispy patties that rivaled any restaurant offering. Seniors would drain the can, mash the fish with a fork, then mix it with beaten egg, crushed saltine crackers, minced onion, and black pepper. The mixture held together perfectly when shaped into patties and fried in bacon grease until both sides turned crispy and golden. Mackerel was cheaper than salmon but just as nutritious, providing protein and omega fatty acids that kept aging joints flexible. The patties required only one small skillet and less than 15 minutes from can to plate, ideal for seniors who tired easily or found standing at the stove difficult. Served hot with lemon or tartar sauce, these cakes tasted far more sophisticated than their simple origins suggested. Many seniors ate them twice weekly throughout the 1950s, never realizing they were practicing nutrition science that wouldn't be formally recognized for decades. Rice pudding was a dessert housewives made by combining leftover rice with milk, sugar, and eggs, then baking until set and creamy. The dish used rice that would otherwise sit in the icebox until it spoiled, transforming it into something sweet that children begged for. Housewives added cinnamon, nutmeg, and raisins by instinct, knowing the flavor profiles their families preferred. Some made it stovetop, stirring constantly until thick, while others preferred the oven method that required less attention. The pudding could be served warm or cold, making it versatile for different occasions. Leftover rice from weeknight dinners found new purpose in this economical dessert that tasted rich despite costing almost nothing extra. The technique passed through families without recipes because proportions adjusted based on how much rice was available. Housewives judged doneness by jiggling the pan and knowing when the center was set but still creamy. Rice pudding appeared at potlucks and family dinners throughout the 50s. Swiss steak turned tough, inexpensive cuts of beef into fork-tender meals through patient braising in tomato sauce with onions and peppers. The technique, pounding flour into the meat before browning, tenderized the fibers while the long, slow cooking broke down connective tissue into silky richness. Working-class families bought round steak, pounded it mercilessly, and trusted time to work its magic. The dish simmered for hours, filling homes with an aroma that drew children asking when dinner would be ready. Served over egg noodles, rice, or mashed potatoes, Swiss steak stretched modest cuts into meals that satisfied the hungriest appetites. The tomato gravy, enriched by meat juices and softened vegetables, was often the best part, sopped up with bread until plates gleamed clean. Factory cafeterias and school lunchrooms featured Swiss steak on weekly rotations. This economical classic has largely disappeared, replaced by faster cooking methods that cannot replicate its slow-cooked tenderness. 24-hour salad was beloved for its simplicity and the way its flavors came together after resting overnight. This dish typically layered canned pineapple, mandarin oranges, and maraschino cherries with whipped cream or custard, and sometimes even marshmallows. The idea was that the ingredients would blend together slowly, creating a unified taste by the time it was served. It was especially popular for holiday dinners or family reunions because it could be made the day before, saving time on busy cooking days. Housewives loved it because it was reliable and always received compliments, while children enjoyed its sweetness and bright colors. Each bite combined creamy textures with bursts of fruit, making it both refreshing and indulgent. It was often presented in a glass bowl, allowing guests to admire the colorful layers. Though recipes for overnight salads are rare in modern kitchens, 24-hour salad still represents the convenience and charm of mid-century entertaining. Number 17. Hoover Stew. Named bitterly after President Herbert Hoover, who left office in 1933 with bread lines stretching around city blocks, Hoover Stew lived on in American kitchens for 30 more years after the Depression officially ended. Macaroni noodles, sliced hot dogs, a can of stewed tomatoes, and a can of corn. All in one pot. Boil the macaroni, add the rest, let it simmer until the tomatoes had soaked into the pasta. In shantytown communities called Hoovervilles during the 1930s, this exact formula fed hundreds out of community pots. By the 1960s, it had moved, generation by generation, into the kitchens of working-class families in Cleveland and Detroit and Gary, Indiana, where it was just called mac and hot dogs. A package of macaroni was 19 cents in 1965. A can of tomatoes was 15 cents. 4 hot dogs stretched to feed 5 people. That was dinner for under 50 cents. The name Hoover had long since been forgotten. The meal hadn't. Apricot chicken probably came from the Middle East, and to be honest, you'll see a lot of dishes that are going to be from other cuisines and cultures. It's because around the same time the slow cooker was born, there was this desire that enveloped the masses, which steered them away from the sausages, bacon breakfasts, and hash browns that America already offered. They wanted to see what was there in other countries, what their streets smelled like, and what kind of food you could find there. Apricot chicken stew is a good example of the kind of flavors you can expect out of a Middle Eastern joint, with tangy and savory focuses being the star of the show. The one-pot method really helps break down the apricot and provide that tanginess, along with a rich sweetness that brings all of it together. It's an incredible way to have your chicken, and if you're on a bulk diet, this is way tastier than grilled fillets over rice. If split pea soup was the one every household knew, Rivel soup was the one most of the country had let go. Except the Pennsylvania Dutch kitchens where it was made exactly as it had been for 200 years. A rivel is a small, irregular flour and egg dumpling made by rubbing coarse flour and a raw egg between your palms over a pot of simmering broth until the mixture breaks into uneven pieces that fall directly into the liquid. No cutting board, no rolling pin, nothing written down. You made rivels by feel, the texture of flour against your skin, the way the egg bound it, the sound of the pieces hitting the hot broth. Pennsylvania Dutch community cookbooks document this technique going back to at least the 19th century, but the knowledge never spread far from the communities that carried it. In a slow cooker, you add the rivels to hot chicken broth in the last 30 minutes and they cook tender. The recipe survives in penciled notes inside old church cookbooks. Whether anyone still makes them by hand is a separate question. Number 20. Egg drop soup. In 1943, a Japanese-American woman named Setsuko Hayashi in Stockton, California, made this for her children with nothing but water, eggs, and soy sauce. She had been released from an internment camp 6 months earlier and had almost nothing in her kitchen. She heated the water, whisked the eggs, and poured them slowly into the pot so they formed thin ribbons. A splash of soy sauce. That was dinner. It took 5 minutes. 2 eggs cost about 2 cents in the early 1940s. Egg drop soup had existed in Chinese cooking for centuries. But during the war years, American families of all backgrounds discovered that eggs and a pot of boiling water could feel like a real meal. It was not filling in the way a stew was filling. Still, it was protein, it was hot, and it kept you going until morning. Number 15. Egg drop soup. This is the meal that appeared when the cupboard held almost nothing but still held eggs. You brought a pot of water to a boil, seasoned it with salt and pepper, threw in whatever scraps of vegetable were left, the tail end of an onion, a handful of dried pasta. Then you cracked 2 eggs and stirred them into the boiling broth in a slow, thin stream so they cooked in feathery shreds through the liquid. The whole dish cost pennies. In mining towns across Pennsylvania and farming communities in southern Illinois, this was the last night of the week meal when everything else was gone. It was hot. It had protein. It was better than it had any right to be. No cookbook told them how to make it. Hunger is a remarkable teacher. The coffee break was not a kindness. It was a negotiation. The first corporate coffee break on record traces to 1902, when Barcolo Manufacturing in Buffalo, New York, gave workers a paid pause and a free cup to keep production moving. By the 70s, the morning break cart was standard in every plant with more than 100 employees. A steel urn brewing since 4 in the morning, styrofoam cups, powdered creamer in a cardboard canister, and a tray of cheese Danish wrapped in cellophane. Nobody called it good coffee. It was hot, it was strong, and you drank it black because the powdered creamer turned it gray. That 15-minute stop, twice a shift, was where gossip moved, friendships formed, and grudges settled between men who otherwise only saw each other through safety goggles. When the company cut it to 10 minutes in '78, the union filed a grievance before the next pot was empty. Fried cornmeal mush began with boiling cornmeal and water with a pinch of salt until it thickened into a paste too heavy to stir easily, then pouring it into a loaf pan and setting it in the icebox overnight. By morning, it had firmed into a solid block you could slice like bread. Each slab went into a skillet of bacon grease or lard and fried until both sides turned golden and the edges went crisp. Inside, it stayed soft and warm, and you ate it with sorghum syrup or molasses poured right over the top. Some called it fried mush, some called it hoe cakes, and in parts of Appalachia, it was simply breakfast for months at a time. Cornmeal cost pennies, and one batch fed a household of 6. The Pennsylvania Dutch had a cousin called scrapple, cornmeal mush packed with ground pork scraps and sage, sliced and fried the same way. The ones who knew never measured. They poured cornmeal into boiling water by feel, watching the color, and knew it was done by the way it pulled from the side of the pot. Hamburger gravy poured over biscuits was the meal that made empty pantries feel abundant. Ground beef was browned in a skillet, then flour was sprinkled over the meat and stirred until it coated everything evenly. Milk went in slowly, stirred constantly until the mixture thickened into rich, creamy gravy studded with seasoned beef. The gravy was ladled generously over split biscuits baked fresh or pulled from yesterday's batch. Salt and pepper were the only seasonings needed, though some grandmothers added a dash of sage. This dish cost pennies, yet delivered satisfaction that expensive meals couldn't match. It was breakfast, lunch, and dinner, depending on the day. Farm families ate it before dawn chores, while city families stretched it across weeknight suppers. The gravy could be thinned with more milk to feed extra mouths when company arrived. Children scraped their plates clean while parents exchanged knowing glances about the budget. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week. The potato soup, the beans and rice, the tomato and egg skillet. Pull out that one pot you have used 1,000 times. Set a place at the table. Not the couch, not the recliner, the table. Because eating alone does not mean eating less. It does not mean standing at the counter with a sleeve of crackers. It does not mean giving up on the kind of meals that kept your family together for decades. These one-pot meals were made by women and men who understood that feeding yourself is not a small thing. It is an act of dignity. It is a decision to keep going. Tell me in the comments which one you still make. I want to know if anyone else heats up a pot of beans on a Tuesday night and eats from it until Thursday. I want to know if potato soup still tastes the same when there is nobody across the table to pass the bread to. Because these meals are proof that one pot, one burner, and one person is enough. It was always enough. Now, I am not a doctor or a dietitian. This is not medical advice. But the people who made these meals knew something about taking care of themselves that no menu plan has ever been able to replace.